Today's call is called Easy Picking Fruit. And we all, I think at one time or another, have heard that term, easy picking fruit. And I want to tell you what to me it means is that there are some ways for improvement, immediate improvement. Let's call them quick easies. There are quick, easy ways that with a few changes you can impact your dealership the most. These quick easies, or the easy picking fruit, as I'm using this term, title of today's call, can be immediately impactful to your operation. First of all, how do we identify what this easy picking fruit is? And over the 10 years of consulting in dealerships, I want to tell you that probably the most important improvements the dealership can make revolve around processes. However, those are tough to get buy-in, they're tough to get implemented, they're not quick easies, they're not easy picking fruit, although I would tell you they're definitely critical to get operational improvement for the dealership, and for lack of a better term, they won't provide immediate result without professional people that are saying, here is the right processes, and here is the right way to implement them and roll them out into your dealership. So I don't want to confuse anybody, but at the same token, that's not easy. When we talk about the walkarounds and the critical importance of doing a good walkaround process and a procedure and identifying what that is, your manufacturer has some simple steps and fixed performance developed a really good walkaround process. And also we've got the information that should be step A, step B, process points to walk people through a good customer intake process. That's critical, but man, that's not easy. That's not quick, easy stuff, is it? When we want to talk about how can I financially impact the dealership and how can I make that improvement quickly, then we've got to identify where we're going to start to get that quick, easy improvement. And that would be labor ops structure. When's the last time you looked at your labor ops, the structure of it, how it's built? Is it profitable? Is it not? How can I get my effective labor rate up? Am I paying the technician too much on this labor operation? Is that structured properly? Is it coming through? For example, I've seen as high as 0.7 paid on an oil change labor operation. When's the last time that was reviewed? When's the last time the detail of that was structured? What's the effective labor rate on a 7/10 oil change operation, paying the technician 7/10 and generating $39.95 in the month of February for the works package on a Ford dealership? What's the effective labor rate of your four-wheel alignments? And you might say, well, everybody's at $89, so I sure can't be over the everybody price. And I'm paying the tech 2 hours because Gosh, that's what we paid for the last 20 years. We sure can't change that. So then the effective labor rate on that labor operation is terrible, right? How about the labor operation on a rotating balance? Well, we've always paid 1-2, and that's a lot of work. They got to roll the tires over to the bounce machine. They got to pull them off. So we can't change that, and everybody's doing it for $39.95, so we sure can't be over $39.95. But yet we've got a 9700 Hunter balance machine that costs $15,000, and no one's selling that feature on the balance. So did you think everybody, the competitors down the street, all have 9700 Hunters? They cost $15,000. Do you think they're doing road force balance selling on your drive lane for about $79, $89? The reality is they're not. I saw an interesting labor operation, an innovative operation. Called it the suspension maintenance package, sold it at about 20,000 miles. That includes two things, maintenance alignment and a rotating balance, suspension maintenance package. But what this guy did is genius, because he took two poor-paying labor operations, he identified them as poor-performing labor operations, created one, and guess what happened? Two poor-performing labor operations, he adjusted the tech pay, so he had a good, effective labor rate. Folks, that's what I call innovative. That's what I call creative. That's what we're talking about here. Quick, easy. Do you need to have poor-performing labor operations that haven't been reviewed for 20 years? Let's say you just spent $25,000 investment, and now you have the state-of-the-art alignment machine that takes about 3 seconds to strap on the heads to the tire because they're clamped on. Takes about 7/10 to do a complete alignment, but yet your labor operations still paying 2 hours that you did 20 years ago with outdated equipment that took 3 times as long for the technician to set up, 3 times as long to look up the data, and just the inaccuracy of the equipment. So do we need to pay poor-performing labor operations without adjustments over the years? Short answer is that's quick, easy. Does it make everybody happy to review these and adjust these on at least an annualized basis? Maybe not. But if you take your total labor op structure, I've seen people, for example, on a differential service, pay 7/10. And I've seen people pay 1.2, which is right. Most people seem to be at 1 hour, but yet look at what the effective labor rate changes to small adjustments. So it could be that you need to adjust down the 4-wheel compensation on one labor op, and it might be you adjust up 1/10 on the differential flush or service. But I promise you one thing. Your labor ops structure is a literal low-hanging fruit situation. And if you reviewed, compared, and did a little homework on what the appropriate best practices are, adjusted, made some fine-tuned adjustments. For example, if you're paying 7/10 on an oil change, shame on you. Shame on you. There's all kinds of ways to structure that, but doesn't mean you have to live with it. And there's nothing in here that you're ever going to hear that says crush your technicians. Obviously, technician compensation and paying the technician appropriately is important to retaining them, and yet we spend $15,000 just to train them, to get them efficient, to get them certified. So the quick, easy money is in how are we generating the gross profit, how are we going to impact the dealership quickly, financially, get the most impact. We've got to talk about what is the repair rate. Is the repair rate of your company competitive? And again, we go back to dealerships that might think $75 repair rate is all their market's going to bear. Can't get over that. We're in Little Town, USA, and all our dealers around here are about the same rate. Well, when's the last time you checked that? And who says you have to be the low-cost provider? I think all of us want to be proud of our profitability. We want to be proud of our gross profit improvement. And frankly, I don't care if you're the lowest cost provider. I don't care if my clients are their lowest cost providers. I want them to be the market leaders. I want them to be gross profit improving dealerships. What's wrong with growing gross profit 25-30% in 2013? Is there someone that told you you couldn't? And if you raise your price structure $4 or $5 on the rate for repairs, do you think that if your competitors knew that, they wouldn't adjust their prices accordingly? Likely so. So don't wait on what the competitors are doing, but by golly, know what they're doing. Survey them. Ask them where they're at. Mostly it just takes a phone call. Now, I will tell you directly, where do you get the largest improvement? What's the easiest pick and fruit? If you want to boil it down to it, what's the best way for your dealership to approach this? Is it process improvement? Is it gross profit improvement? Ideally, it's the answer here in a multiple choice question would be C, all of the above. But the rate structure, the labor ops structure, that's where I would say that you start. Does that mean you forget process improvement? Does that mean you forget walk around customer intake inspections? Not at all. Ideally, all of the above is there. But where I would prefer to see a dealership start is improving their gross profit, improving their labor operations structure, being innovative and creative on the poor performing labor ops, and realistic. that, man, maybe we can't afford $35 effective labor rate on certain labor ops, such as tire rotations or rotating balances, or four-wheel alignments or two-wheel alignments. Look, identify what are your poor performing labor operations and massage them. It might be 1/10 here or 1/10 there. You pay 5/10 for a tire rotation? You pay 4/10? These are the types of things you need to analyze on at least an annual basis. Compared with the other dealerships, there's some real good companies out there. We do that for our clients, analyze the labor op structure. Now, I would say this, we've even come so far as we can remotely access people's computers if they allow us to, and analyze labor operations and structure and the accounting side of it from a remote access. So if you want to take advantage of that, it's a brand new service we offer, and it doesn't matter where you are in Canada, India. I know we've got both dealers on calls from across the world, but analyze your labor operation structure. Look at it. Be creative. Be innovative. And where you need to make adjustments, make them, and you will score an immediate return on gross profit performance. Now we'll open it up for questions and comments. Mike, if you see anyone, just raise their hand by pushing number 1 on your phone, and that will show your hand raised to Mike, our moderator, and we'll acknowledge that question or a comment. And also, if you would like to address an issue in your shop, you can also push 1.
Tony, you have a question or concern?
Yeah, good morning. John and I are together here this morning, and Rob, you talked to specifically an oil and filter change labor time, agreed that 7/10 is quite excessive. Do we have a consensus on what we think is a fair amount to pay on an oil and filter change?
Oh, good question. And some people, are structuring it. If you're looking at that labor operation, there's a couple things that impact it. First of all, dispatch, right? Are you going to dispatch that to a $30 an hour tech? Or are you going to dispatch that to an hourly on a quick service lane? So, first of all, dispatch would be a prime way to look at that labor operation as far as gross profit structure. So, yeah, you have to analyze the labor operation, but also how it's being dispatched and what skill level technician is going to perform that service. But let's assume that 4/10 would be what I would consider the maximum amount of compensation for an oil change that's allowable, and some real progressive shops are putting a flat dollar amount on the compensation. So instead of paying 4/10, they would allow $8 for an oil change, and then any technician, any skill level could do it, but the compensation would remain the same. It would be $8 even on an hourly. They would cost the RO out at a specific dollar amount instead of tenths compensation. They would say that's all I can afford to pay on an oil change, and that dollar number would appear. be tracked separately.
That's interesting. That's a good idea. Do you have any advice for, let's say, as a service manager, I did want to address some of my labor time and trim a few back a little bit to kind of true things up for today's technology. Great example with the new, specifically Hunter alignment machine that clamps right onto the tire. Do you have any advice or suggestions on how to approach that with the team of techs?
I would include them in the discussion, and that's a great point. If you just randomly say, "Hey, I'm cutting it here, I'm cutting you there, and it starts today. Enjoy your day." Totally wrong way to do it. And include them in the discussion and say, "Hey, here's my situation, guys. Unfortunately, we're looking at labor operations. We've got some very poor performing labor operations. I'd like to discuss them with you and get your input." It might surprise you, that approach, how progressive it is. And say, at the same token, if you limit that conversation to 10 or 15 labor operations that are the ugliest or poorest performing, include the techs in them and take their input. Doesn't mean that you can please everybody, but I guarantee you that that's the only way to approach the issue. Good question. Does that help?
Yes, it does. That's good advice. I appreciate it. I know some union shops, there are provisions written into contracts for the formation of a labor time review board where there's 3 or 4 technicians involved. But I definitely like having the techs presenting the concern and the issue. Here's our problem. Here's our low-performing labor operations. Our labor times are outdated and too high. What does everybody think? I think that's great advice.
All right, thank you. Good comments, good questions. Anybody else? All you do again is push the number 1, and Mike, our moderator, will see your hand up.
Just tough.
Hey, Rob.
Yes.
You were talking a little bit about the walk-around process earlier. I have an interesting kind of an interesting challenge, so I hope this isn't too far off the beat, but I'd love to get your input while we're all on the call that may help some other folks. In our efforts to get to the customer when we do the walk-around, and we know how important it is to get out there to the customer before they get out and walk around and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes goes by. What do you do in a situation when you have a beautiful service drive and it's remodeled and set up and everybody's in a glass enclosure, and the glass enclosure might be about 20 or 30 yards away from the service drive, but yet everybody is committed to the customer and wants to get out there and engage the customer? How do you overcome something like that when geography is a barrier?
Well, and this is true for me in that I never had even a drive-through in a shop I ran. And if you look at that, that's about as inconvenient as possible because we're asking the customer to come in the door and come up to the counter and then engage an advisor, and at that point, go to the vehicle. Just remember, it isn't the best equipment or the best setup that wins. It's the best customer intake process when they refuse to compromise. So the facility can be all shiny and great and state of the art. Doesn't mean the advisors will even use it appropriately.
Right.
Doesn't mean they'll even perform a walk around. So the best is refusing to compromise the process for the facility.
Thank you.
And it might be that's bad, where let's call it the glass tower separates advisors from the drive-through. But key word there, it's glass. They can see. They still see the customers driving in. All right. Good comment. Good question.
Thanks.
Anybody else? All right. Great call today, folks. I appreciate your attendance. And you'll get everyone on our list will get a recording of the call. Mike will edit it, send it out sometime today. Appreciate the way that this call is growing. I started the call a few months ago, and Mike and I were chatting, and he told me how many were involved in it today. And for being such a young call, I'm totally blown away by the number of people that keep getting added to it and listen to it. I appreciate everybody's attention and time, and also it feels good that the call is growing and as quickly as it is. Thanks again. Everybody have a great day, and enjoy reviewing your labor operations and picking up some easy fruit. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob.
You are currently the only person in this conference.